Hi everyone, welcome to the SRCER Tools and Tips. My name is Sylvia and I'm with your Association of Realtors. And I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker this afternoon. Before we begin, let's just review some housekeeping rules to help the meeting stay in order. This is a 1-hour training. We kindly ask that you please mute yourself unless you're speaking. If you have any questions or comments, please use the chat dialog on the right or use the raise your hand feature. Our speaker today is Michael Lucarelli, CEO of Rentspree, and he will be sharing valuable information about Rentspree and how you can take advantage of this member benefit. Please help me give a warm welcome to Michael. Take it away, Michael.
Great, thank you so much, Sylvia. I really appreciate you hosting this and doing such a great job organizing everything. And also thank you very much to all the attendees as well for taking the time to join us today. So we're really looking forward to it. It looks like we have a really great group here. And I went ahead and shared my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that all right. And just to remind everyone, Rentspree is a part of the CRMLS marketplace since about 2017. So been around for a little bit here, and we have a really nice tool that can help you to automate screening processes. And so basically, we're going to go through a couple items today. And as I mentioned, and as Sylvia introduced me, my name is Michael Lucarelli. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Rentspree, and I've done dozens of presentations, really love training agents as well on best practices as far as screening goes. And so really taking a quick look at the agenda today, the first thing that we're going to touch upon are the key tenant screening points that I would encourage all of you to take a close look at, whether you are relatively newer to screening or maybe you have some experience doing so. We're going to touch on some points that can really help and get things done. And so also we'll then take a look at tenant screening steps. So what I'm going to do is break down for you step by step all the aspects that need to be covered and what things you need to be thinking about for each step as part of a really like A to Z screening process. From there, we'll go into a screening demonstration where I'll actually get the opportunity to explain to you how you can start screening your first tenant in about 2 minutes using Rentspree, which is again a tool that's offered to you guys and made available really specifically for this purpose. And really the whole reason why we work so hard to provide Rentspree to you guys is because we know that maybe for a lot of you, working with rentals isn't maybe the main thing that you're focusing on. If it is, that's great too. But if it's not, we know that you might really be focusing on sales transactions at certain times and wanting to really get some of those things maybe more prioritized for you, but you still find a regular need to work with rentals. So Rentspree really exists to provide you with a streamlined way to handle a rental transaction, in particular, getting all the information that you need to be screened quickly and efficiently. Because as you know, with working with rentals, in some cases, you might not have the same earnings as you would from a sales transaction. And so it's important to think about the time that you're spending on your screening process, because any wasted time really magnifies to your bottom line, given that, again, you might not tend to be making so much for a closed rental transaction compared to a sales transaction. And then to finally finish up, we'll also touch upon some questions that we've gotten throughout the session. Also, we have Stephen, who's from the Rentspree team. So if you type into that box with any questions, Stephen will do his best to answer any questions that you have in the background. And then at the end, we'll pick a couple good questions and see if we can answer those to the crowd. So to start off, it's 2020, where is screening headed? So what we're seeing is really a lot of changing regulations out in the screening industry, which make it more important than ever to have a set screening process, and using something that's uniform helps you really to keep on the same path as you go forth and do screening, maybe for multiple properties and for multiple tenants. And the more that we can stay on the same path, the greater that reduces our liability, which is also important because we're now seeing more and more increased risk in terms of discrimination and other aspects, and also like data security, which we'll touch upon as well. But that's really important as you think about the screening process. And then also, like, the good news is that Rentspree brings a lot of new technologies available to you guys, again, to create efficiencies, increase professionalism, and to reduce liability as well. So we'll be touching upon some of these points today. And also to kind of like start as well, we're really seeing a lot of issues that are coming into play for a lot of agents that are screening. We're seeing breaches when handling sensitive information. So I don't care whether you're a large company or a smaller individual that's just doing work for yourself as a realtor. No matter who you are, you really need to be aware of the sensitive information that you're handling. And in particular, when you engage in a rental screening process, you're coming into contact with, in many cases, a lot of PII for renters. And so you have a responsibility to maintain that information safely and securely, to dispose of it safely and securely, and like really safeguarding that information that you come into contact with, which again, we'll touch upon today about how we can kind of combat some of those risks. We also see increased applicant identity fraud. So the more things that come to become more digital, and in particular with COVID, when it may be more limited about having face-to-face interaction with individuals, we all need to be extremely cognizant of the risk that applicants are even more easily able to potentially misrepresent themselves and engage in fraudulent practices. And so having methods in place to verify applicant identities is really important so that you know who you're renting to. And then finally as well, really being aware of discriminatory practices and making sure that we're avoiding those at all costs as we go through a screening process. Screening tends to be a little bit different again compared to sales transactions, because as you're working with a sale, it's really a one-time thing that is done, and then the buyer buys the property, they move in, and that's pretty much it. Whereas when a renter is screened and engaged with, the landlord or the manager is going to have a long-term relationship that's established with that renter. So it's more of an ongoing relationship that's being established, and the screening is the very first step of that process. So there's some unique discriminatory considerations that you should take into account as you go through the screening process. And so really, I like to talk about these 4 tenant screening points. Again, whether you've been doing it for a while or relatively new, just like to keep some of these things in mind to inform how we go through our screening process. So the first is the availability and accuracy of the information that we're receiving. So what information can we access, and how accurate is all of that information? And so this is important to think about, like, are you getting rental applications, credit checks, background eviction histories? All that information is really important to be able to access that in order to have an informed decision-making process. But what's arguably equally as important is the accuracy of that information. So making sure that not only are we getting this information back, but we're verifying that information, particularly if that information comes from a subjective source, such as directly from the applicant. We always want to make sure that if we're really relying upon that information, that we're ensuring that it is accurate before we move forward to make a decision. Because if we're making a decision based on inaccurate information, then that most likely can translate into actually a poor decision. So really just double checking that and making sure that things are accurate. Also, laws and regulations. So great resource with the association to keep up to tabs on laws and regulations that are impacting screening and rentals and real estate as a whole. So making sure that we're following best practices and lowering risk. Next, moving on to cost. So there's a couple different costs associated with screening. And so really there's some straightforward things like when you're screening, is there a fee to start screening? Is there a monthly cost, any setup fees or anything like that? And that's important. And also thinking about if you're paying for screening fees. So those would be what I would call direct costs. However, what you really want to think about, in my opinion, as far as screening goes, is really the indirect costs, such as reducing the time that you're spending on the screening process itself. And so again, like the better that we can create efficiencies and streamline the process, you're really going to be reducing your costs overall in the long run, and really allowing you to focus on higher value activities as you can get these transactions closed faster. So are you able to move forward efficiently and really get those reports done, and that will really lower your costs associated with your real estate activities as they pertain to rentals. Finally, we talk about convenience. So as you go forward and may need to access screening information from tenants, and you're using a screening software, is there a setup time involved? Do you have to fill out an application, have an on-site inspection done, go through a credentialing process? Those are things to take into account and to make sure that even well before that you need to screen your tenant, that you have those things set up and you're aware for how long that's going to take. And then on the back end, when an applicant applies and you go and it's time to run their screening reports, what's the turnaround time that it takes to get those reports back? After an applicant authorizes their reports and applies, is it going to take a couple of business days for their results to come back? That's something that you should be aware of as well in terms of now being able to move forward and again, complete that transaction in a timely manner. So again, just some points to take into account, and we'll be touching upon all these in various ways as we go through the rest of the presentation and then the demonstration later on. And so here's what I would say is really an essential like A to Z screening process. And so we really separate this into 3 broad categories and then break those down a little bit further. So first is the before, then there's the during, and then of course there's the after. So for the before, so really before you start screening, one thing that a lot of realtors don't do that we see is they don't really take the time to set some screening criteria with their landlord for if they have a lease listing. And so really understanding what the screening criteria is going to help to make the decision-making process easier and also reduce the likelihood of potentially discriminatory actions or that could be construed as discriminatory. And so examples of screening criteria are setting your like baseline rent to income ratio, credit score ranges for acceptance and denials, thinking about like how the residence history that you're going to allow to accept someone. So really setting the criteria up front so that you can simply get an applicant's information, apply it to the criteria that you've set, and then be able to make a decision using that objective criteria. And this is important to demonstrate that you're utilizing objective criteria as part of your screening process, such as those that I mentioned, like rent to income ratios and credit scores are great for that. But making sure that you're utilizing objective criteria as part of your screening, which then eliminates any kind of thought that subjective criteria could have been used, or in other words, like opinions or things that may kind of fall into protected classes, but instead just looking at really information that has no bearing on any protected classes and is really solely used to determine whether or not an applicant will be able to meet the financial responsibilities of renting out the unit. So that's really important as a preliminary step. Second, marketing the property. So we'll touch upon this a little bit, not in too much detail, pretty straightforward, but again, some nuances here because again, it's not just for marketing of a listing for sale, it's for rent, so it's a little bit different. And then a really good time saving component is being able to pre-screen applicants. So when you pre-screen applicants, you really set, again, a baseline for applicants so that you are not moving forward needlessly in the process with applicants who might not be a fit, might not meet your minimum criteria, or just, maybe the timeline is just off and maybe they're looking to move in a couple months and you're looking for someone sooner and you need someone sooner. So it doesn't make sense to move forward and waste everyone's time. So pre-screening is really important for reducing the time that you're spending on applicants who just from the start wouldn't have worked out. Looking at the during, so they're showing the property, which is again, like straightforward, but want to be careful on this aspect here, especially when you're working with rentals, collecting rental applications, running screening reports. And then conversely, we talk about verifying information. So we'll touch upon verifying applicant information, issuing a decision, and then of course, signing the lease. So this is like a breakdown, again, like kind of high level of all the steps to do a successful screening process. And the extent that you can follow these more or less uniformly, it's going to be beneficial over time for you. And so talking about really the first step here is marketing the property. And so again, like you want to make sure that your content is as professional as possible because that's going to really influence maybe the quality of applicants that are being attracted to the property. Because again, that has a bearing over the long term because there's a long-term relationship being established here. So it really, obviously, I think it's always important to have professional content, but even more so when you're working with a rental, just because you want to increase the likelihood of attracting a high quality applicant. Posting the rental online, there's a lot of options here. We've seen a lot on Facebook, actually. People are putting rentals on Facebook. Obviously, Craigslist is an old standby, and I think a lot of people are maybe hit or miss on it. Depends who you talk to, but still, like, people post on there, posting on the MLS and more. And then a last thing here is to really think about sharing your screening criteria and mentioning some of your baseline requirements so that renters know really what you're looking for, and you allow them to self-eliminate so that they may not move forward or even start reaching out to you. If you're able to just share a couple things, like maybe the score that you're looking for, then they might just say, oh, I don't meet that. I'm not going to bother reaching out about this property. That saves everyone a whole lot of time. So providing that upfront can be definitely something that's really beneficial. So once you've marketed the property and you get a couple leads that have reached out, a good step here is to engage in a pre-screening process. And so there's templates out there and questions that you can ask. And here's some of the questions that are a little bit more unique that we see a lot of our agents and landlords that they might ask. So the first of those is, what would you like to know about the property? And now this question is purposefully open-ended, just because it really gives you a great idea to kind of see what's on the tenant's mind or the prospect's mind, things they're looking for. It helps you really get a baseline and get some information from them without asking anything too specific. So oftentimes when you ask this, you can end up getting information that you weren't really expecting to get. Second, again, as similar to including some of the criteria in your advertising, you also want to make sure that when you get on a pre-screening call, to the extent that you can, make it painfully obvious what the major terms of the rental are, such as the monthly rent amount, the security deposit that you're asking for, the lease term, the move-in dates, things like that. Just really important to get those out up front. You'll be surprised how many people don't share that information in detail to prospects. Again, just make sure that you guys are on the same page in terms of the rental. And then again, like sharing your screening criteria on that call. So making sure that you're letting them know, you know, hey, I'm looking for, you know, like a 650 credit score, for example. And then like ask them, hey, what do you think your credit score is? And so it allows you to also get a baseline and see who might be at least close to qualifying for your minimum criteria that you've hopefully already set up. And then finally, a little bit unconventional, but I always like to leave a little bit of silence on some of those pre-screening calls. And when you leave some of that silence, you'll be surprised about the information that applicants will be willing to share with you, which can also be very telling and can give you some really good information to go off of. So making sure, again, that you're going through a pre-screening process, I think, is absolutely vital. And even some people, they do like a pre-screening form. So another thing that you can do, we've seen out there, is you can set up a form online. You can do, there's a variety of like free options that are out there, and you can send a little short questionnaire to applicants after you receive a lead, which is asking them some directed questions, and then you can get their responses that way as well. So we see people that do things like that if they want to even save a little bit more time, but most people do like to just get on the phone with people who might be good to move forward with. And so after you pre-screen, you've identified some applicants who might be a really good fit to move forward with. You know, now we talk about doing showings. And so I know that we're in the times of COVID-19, so you really want to be careful about paying attention to current rules and regulations on a national, statewide, and local level. So being sure that you're checking with your associations and making sure that you're adhering to not only the laws, but also making sure that we're prioritizing safety as well as we go through and do showings. And I would direct you to reach out to some of the association resources with questions about how we can interact with applicants in person. But that being said, kind of putting COVID aside for now, there's generally 3 schools of thoughts when we do showings. And so first is individual showings, where you just meet an applicant one-on-one at the property. And this can be beneficial because you can get one-on-one time with the applicant. However, on the downside is that it can end up being a little bit more time consuming because you're only able to kind of knock out one applicant at a time. And then if someone doesn't show up, you've just wasted a trip going out to the property. So it's good because you can get, again, one-on-one time, answer questions from an applicant, get to know them a little bit better, but you can end up wasting time. Open houses tend to be a little bit more efficient, but again, really want to be careful that you're not doing anything like that unless you're allowed to at this time. And even if you do an open house at some point in the future, want to keep in mind that it doesn't really give you that one-to-one interaction with applicants, and you might not get a chance to get to know them as well and get a feel for them. And also, obviously, not able to address questions that they have if there's a bunch of people at the open house. So a lot of our agents have liked to do block showings, which is really a hybrid between individual showings and open houses. So it's really setting up like a 2-hour time frame. Instead of letting anyone come anytime within that 2-hour time frame, you're breaking it up into 15-minute increments and allowing people to schedule each 15 minutes. So you can still kind of knock out multiple people, but you're not having a bunch of people there at the same time, which could be potentially safer, again, depending on what's allowed and what's not. It also allows you to get some one-on-one interaction with people so you can get a feel for them and address their questions individually. And if someone doesn't show up, it's not that big of a deal because you ideally have people scheduled before and after them. So it'll just be like a 15-minute window that's not taken, but you'll swing right in and get the next one once they show up. So after you get a feel and the applicant's able to check out the property, really it's about collecting the rental application now. And so getting the rental application is really the first meaningful step that you're taking now to gather the information that's needed to move forward and get into now making a decision. So applications typically include their personal information, like their name, move-in dates, other occupants, etc. Their residence information, so current and previous landlord, addresses, rent amounts. You get their employment and income information, such as current and previous employer, income, contact information, references as well. Then you get pets and of course some miscellaneous information as well. So a couple points on the rental application. We see a lot of agents out there and landlords who have what you might call like a no blanks policy. So that just tells you to make sure that you have all the key pieces of information on the rental application filled out before you really move forward to make a decision about the applicant. So it allows you to not have to make a decision, let's say if they left off a key piece of information, such as their current employer, contact information, or their current monthly income. It's really hard to make a decision when you're missing those pieces of information. So you want to make sure that you insist that you're getting all of those pieces of information prior to being able to move forward and make a decision. Also, you typically want to collect a completed and distinct rental application from every occupant in the property who's going to be over the age of 18. A lot of people think that you can have maybe like a husband and a wife or a couple that fill out the same application, but you need to keep in mind that each individual has their own distinct income, they have their own distinct rental history in many cases, and they have their own distinct screening information and credit. So you want to make sure that you're collecting distinct sets of information from each individual, regardless of whether they're married or whatnot. So once you've collected the rental application, now we start thinking about screening reports. So there's a couple screening reports that people commonly pull. There's a credit report where you can really assess the applicant's ability to meet the financial requirements of renting out the property. And again, this is a good piece of information to have because it lets you know if the person can really pay the rent or not, or gives at least some indication on that question. So you get credit scores, their payment history, trade lines, collections, inquiries, fraud indicators, and more. Some people also like to get a background check. This also, you want to be really careful if you're getting a background check that you consult with an experienced landlord tenant attorney prior to accessing a background check, and that you're being very deliberate, and again, consulting with legal counsel prior to making decisions based upon background check information. But nonetheless, that's something that people access. Looking on here, so we have eviction history. So being able to see someone's rental history and whether they've had any unlawful detainers filed against them, judgments, and all that stuff can give you an indication of whether they've had some trouble in the past with their previous residence history. Taking a look at an eviction history report can give you a good indication as to that. And then finally, a lot of people here incorporate an identity verification step into the process, which Rentspree does. So when Rentspree provides screening reports, and we'll again touch on this in a little bit, but you want to make sure that you know who you're renting out the property to. So for example, if I'm applying to a property, I know my credit is poor, what's going to stop me from utilizing my friend's social security number and passing that off as my own potentially? So you want to make sure that you have some step or process in place to prevent things like that from happening. And so that's really important, again, because you want to make sure that when that you know exactly who you're renting to, pretty much. And so moving along here, after you've gotten really the main pieces of information from the applicant that you'll utilize to make your decision, now it's really important to verify that information and at least the main points. And so I'll give you some indication to what really are the key things that should be verified here. And really, first and foremost of those, you want to make sure that you're looking at these 5 pieces of information, which are generally from the rental application. So the rental application information is particularly important to verify, just because that's information that's coming directly from the applicant. So it's not coming from really like a secured source such as the credit bureau or Rentspree. The rental application is coming directly from the renter. So what's going to stop them from writing something that's incorrect? There's not much except for the fact that you need to verify that information one way or the other. So verifying the identity first is important. Again, if you had that step, that's great. A lot of people also will collect a government issued ID or something like that to verify as well. Next is residence history. So thinking about how we verify residence history, this is where it's important that you have had all the information already filled out on the rental application, which will enable you then to verify the residence history by potentially contacting the current landlord or previous landlord. And on that note, if you're going to reach out and verify residence history, most landlords and agents consider it more important to make sure that you get into contact with not only the current landlord, but even more importantly, the previous landlord. Why? Because let's say this person is maybe a poor tenant. Their current landlord is not as likely to give you a true picture of the applicant, because that current landlord might just want that renter to get out of their property. So it can be a little bit more helpful in certain cases to make sure that you get into contact with the previous landlord, because this is an individual who does not have a vested interest in the outcome of your rental decision. And so they could be more likely to give you an accurate picture of the applicant. So then looking at employment as well. So you want to make sure that you're contacting their current employer and previous to establish maybe a track record, but again, like really making sure that they have stable employment, their income is what they say it was, and all that stuff, so that you can have some comfort that they can pay the rent and pay it on time, month after month. Also, like kind of tying in with employment, but if they have other sources of income that are outside of their main employment, you want to also get some verification as well. So a lot of people will collect pay stubs, W-2s, bank statements. For people that are self-employed, I see a lot of people are collecting tax returns to verify income for self-employed individuals. So making sure that you're taking those proper steps to verify income as well. And finally, verifying applicant references. So this is probably not the most important out of these 5 categories, but references are in most cases included on the rental application. So contacting references as well can be beneficial for an applicant. So once you really verify the information that you've gotten, now in most cases, it's time to make a decision. So accept is pretty straightforward, but then there's accept on condition and reject. So to accept on condition or reject, in most cases, is considered an adverse action. And you want to be, again, extra careful that you are delivering notice to applicants the proper way if you are going to accept on condition or reject the applicant. And accept on condition is usually for cases where someone maybe meets some of your minimum rental criteria, but not all of it. And so for that reason, you want to accept them, but maybe let's say you want to require 1.5 months of rent as the security deposit instead of 1 month to account for the fact that they maybe didn't meet your minimum criteria. So that would be an accept on condition. But other aspects are requiring a cosigner, increasing the rent, because again, they might not have met all your criteria, but maybe only partial. So you accept on condition, you definitely want to make sure that you're letting them know that your reasoning and what the conditions are. And then if you reject an applicant, again, considered an adverse action here as well. So under the FCRA, you want to make sure that you're providing proper notice to the applicant of your rejection to them if your decision was based even in part on any of the screening reports that you received on them. So making sure that you're providing that information. And Rentspree can provide these forms and sample letters for you on the platform, making it really easy for you to issue decisions to applicants after you screen them on Rentspree. And so hopefully you've accepted someone and you can move forward and sign the lease. So I think hopefully it's a happy time and we can move forward with tenants that we feel comfortable renting to. And hopefully it's going to be a good long-term relationship with high-quality tenants. And there's plenty of content out there about signing leases. We won't go too much into the details of a lease agreement today, but yeah, that's typically the recap on the screening process culminating in the signing of the lease. And I think I'll pause if we have any questions that we've gotten so far before I move on to the demonstration portion of the webinar today. Do we have any questions, Stephen, to address possibly?
Let's move on.
Great. I think we're ready to move on here. So we'll then transition now to a kind of like learning a little bit more about Rentspree here, and then we'll do a demonstration as well. So as we mentioned, Rentspree has been in the CRMLS marketplace since about 2017, and it really saves you a lot of time by allowing you to instantly access screening reports and really everything that you need to conduct a thorough screening process. Also, another aspect of Rentspree is that it really reduces your liability as well. So most people in the past, when they've needed to screen, it typically tends to shake out that you need to gather the social security numbers of the applicants and then send them off to a third party and then get the screening reports back. And this is something where you're now handling a lot of sensitive information, which the social security number is arguably the most sensitive piece of information from an applicant. With Rentspree, you never need to see or handle the social security number of an applicant, because the applicant simply enters their social security numbers directly on Rentspree when they apply, and then you just get the screening reports. So you never actually have to come into contact with the social security numbers of any applicants anymore. So really reducing liability in a big way there. Furthermore, when applicants pay a screening fee, in the past you might have had to chase applicants for a screening fee, out of pocket, hound them for it. They don't get back to you, and what's the point of you chasing someone around or having them pay for something that's really not a large amount in the end of the day in the grand scheme of things? And so Rentspree actually allows the renters to pay the screening fee directly online so that you don't have to handle it, and it makes it for a much cleaner transaction from your perspective. And on that point, so Rentspree has no cost to you. There's no monthly setup, there's no fees, there's no minimums. So basically you can start screening your first tenant in about a minute or two. And if you never use it for months, it's not a problem. Again, there's not going to be any costs incurred for you to utilize that. The only cost is just a $30 screening fee that renters pay to apply, which, as I mentioned, they pay directly on Rentspree for a streamlined process. And so what Rentspree includes is, number one, an online rental application. So applicants fill out that application online, and there's some really great time-saving benefits of the online rental application. Number one, it doesn't let the applicant submit their reports unless they've filled everything out that you need to make a decision. So you're not going to get something back that's incomplete and then have to go back and forth chasing them down for it. They have to fill out or answer everything, otherwise they cannot submit it. Also, if applicants are listing co-applicants on their application, those co-applicants can automatically be sent an application to fill out as well. So you don't have to go and do that yourself or start thinking about or have to know ahead of time how many people are going to be in the property. You're going to see all of that, and Rentspree can facilitate all the occupants over the age of 18 to apply automatically for you. And another point here is that everything on Rentspree, whether it's for renters or even for you, it's fully mobile responsive. So it makes it really easy for renters to apply on any mobile device, even laptop, phone, whatever. And also for you, if you're on the go, you can easily pull up and have Rentspree on your phone. There's not an app. You just go to the website, so it's really easy. And then you can move forward and send screening requests there. So we also provide a TransUnion credit report, which is fully detailed with score, collections, trade lines, etc. We provide a criminal background check if you would like. We have our eviction history report, which is a 50-state eviction history check. And then most of you out there, when you screen a tenant, you need to most likely share those reports with another individual. So if it's a lease listing, a lot of realtors need to share those reports with the landlord to make a decision. Or let's say you're representing a renter, which, by the way, you can use Rentspree if you're representing renters as well. You might need to share it with a listing agent or a landlord. So Rentspree actually facilitates the sharing of those reports directly through the platform, which not only makes it convenient, but also makes it more secure for you. That way you don't have to be emailing information that's potentially sensitive and then sending it through an unsecured email. You can actually grant access to a landlord, and the landlord will be able to view the reports and then even communicate with you through the platform to then move forward with the screening decision. And then finally, as I mentioned here, Rentspree provides acceptance and denial letters as well on the platform so that you can easily provide rental decisions to applicants. And so next we'll move on and do a demonstration on Rentspree so you guys can see exactly how that works. And hopefully everyone can see that now. This is on the CRMLS website. So this is actually Rentspree in the CRMLS marketplace, which is one of the places where you can access Rentspree easily. So Rentspree is here, it's in CRMLS, and there's some information on this page about Rentspree. And if you would like, on the CRMLS page, you can even schedule a live demonstration with an applicant directly here. So you can schedule that, and then an applicant can reach out to you, and or a Rentspree trainer will be able to reach out to you and walk you through to be able to have you apply. So you can, I'm sorry about that, screen your tenants here and schedule a demo so a Rentspree representative will reach out to you. But for now, we'll go directly to Rentspree from the CRMLS page. So this is the website. Also, you can go directly here to crmls.rentspree.com. And when you get there, you'll see a CRMLS logo and say tenant screening made easy. And so you can hit start screening to screen a tenant right away. And so on this, you can actually even start screening directly, just utilizing your CRMLS login. But also, if you want, you can just enter an email address and a password to start screening right away, which is what we'll do now. And so this is the Rentspree dashboard. And so here's where you can add new listings, screen new tenants, review reports that you've received. All of it can be done easily from the Rentspree dashboard here. And so what I'll do first is hit this Start Screening Applicants button to start with my first applicant. And so before you screen your first tenant, you enter your mailing address. And from there, it's just now a matter of adding the property that the applicant would like to apply to. And as I mentioned before as well, you can utilize Rentspree for screening regardless of which side of the transaction that you're on. So you can, obviously, if you're representing a listing or a landlord, it's pretty straightforward. You just enter the listing address here. Also, if you're representing the renter, you can enter the address that the renter might be interested in applying to, and then the applicant will also be able to apply to you. And as an added benefit, when the renter does apply to you through Rentspree, you'll get the reports, and there actually won't be an address listed on the reports, so you can take those reports and actually utilize them and present them to multiple listing agents or landlords to have to facilitate applications to multiple properties without the applicant having to refill information or having to pay or undergo the process multiple times. So for now, I'll enter an address so we can show how it works. And so once you've entered the property address, you just have to answer 2 questions about how you want to set up your screening. So the first is who will pay the screening fee. So you can have applicant or me. So 98%, and what I mentioned to you earlier, 98% of members have applicants pay the screening fee, so you can select applicants here. However, we also give you the option, just for flexibility, in case you'd like to pay that screening fee yourself, just if you have a special client, or maybe they've already paid you a screening fee and you didn't want to have to go back and make them pay on Rentspree, you always have that option. However, most people, again, select applicant just because it makes for an easier and cleaner transaction. Once I've selected applicant, from there, I select which screening reports I'd like to receive back. So there's a rental application, credit report and score, criminal background check, and eviction report. And you'll notice that these are fully a la carte, so you can select and deselect them as you please. And what you'll also notice as well is that anytime you get screening reports, it automatically includes an applicant identity verification process. So you'll be able to get that included with any of the screening reports that you receive back. And just a little bit more information on this. So because we allow you to select and deselect some of these reports, it really gives you a lot of flexibility. So we have some people that like to get a rental application first from the applicant before they move forward and run screening reports on them. And that is a nice thing to do sometimes if you want to kind of like incorporate extra pre-screening before you run screening reports on them. So you can have the applicant just fill out the rental application, which won't incur any cost for you or the applicant. And the applicant can fill that out. And then if they look good, you can then take an additional step to then request the screening reports after the fact. So there's lots of things that can be done here to, again, provide flexibility for you depending on what you'd like to do. But most people, they'll get everything at once for efficiency's sake. So that's what we'll do. We'll select all four and we'll hit next. So next is where you can actually get the applicant to apply. So how do you go from point A to point B, getting the applicant to apply? So it's really simple and straightforward. However, also gives you some great flexibility in how you'd like to run your screening process. So first is request reports via email or mobile. So if you click that, you'll see email and text message. And so here, all you need to do is just get the email address of the applicant. And you can enter more than one if you have more than one applicant. And all you do is you enter the email addresses, you hit send request, and as far as collecting all the reports go, your job is pretty much done because now those applicants have received a notification email, which has the property address on it and your name, so they know what they're applying for and who they're applying to. They click a link in the email, and once they click the link in the email, they'll be directly taken through Rentspree's screening process, which for them, it takes usually like no more than 10 minutes, but it depends on how the information that they have on hand for the application. As soon as they click submit and verify their identity, you get an email notification that the reports are ready. And by the way, the reports are generated, as I mentioned earlier, instantaneously. So that goes even for nights and on weekends. So there's no turnaround time. There's no waiting. And again, like even if you needed to get someone who applies at night, which a lot of renters do, or if it's a weekend and someone's applying on the weekend, the reports can be generated at any time, which allows you to really compress the transaction time. But if you didn't have their email or mobile, or let's say you wanted something different, we also give you this link. So it's called a lease link, and this is a link that you can copy and then paste anywhere that you'd like applicants to be able to view and apply to your property. So this link takes applicants directly to your application page, and it's specific to you and the property. And we have a lot of agents that will take this link and they can post it on their websites. They post it on social media. We even have a lot that will take this link, and when they have a lease listing, they'll put it into the private remarks section of the MLS. And what that does is it lets others know, if an agent's looking at the listing, that you want renters to apply through Rentspree, and they can use the link. And when a renter visits this link and applies, it'll kind of funnel the applicants back to you. So kind of casting a net out there, and anyone that visits this link will appear in your Rentspree dashboard where you can evaluate them and manage them there. Finally, for when we are doing showings more frequently, we also provide a screening handout, and we can take a look at it here. So what it is, it's a one-page handout that includes all the information that's needed to make a decision about an applicant. So the link is here, as well as the QR code for your property's application page. And so when you meet an applicant at the property, all you need to do is print a couple of these out. And when a renter wants to apply, you simply hand them the flyer and they can either visit this link or scan this code, and the applicant will be able to easily apply directly to the property, and they can even do so on their phone. So the reports can even come back instantaneously on the spot if they really want to put their money where their mouth is and they're really interested. You can actually get their results instantaneously while they're still at the property by utilizing this flyer here. And even if, like, let's say you're not at the property, but you have maybe a lockbox on it and people are doing showings, you can even print a stack of these out and leave them at the property so that whoever visits will know the screening process that you'd like applicants to go through. And again, it'll bring all those reports right back to you. So looking back on Rentspree here, if we take a look back at the dashboard, what we can see is that the property address has been added. I have 2 requests sent and 0 completed. And if I click on the property, what I'll see is my 2 applicants that I've sent requests to. And even more importantly, I'll see the statuses of those applicants. So I can see request sent, renter hasn't started. And so this is also important because you can actually easily look here and see which applicants had a request sent successfully, who started working on it and hasn't done it, and who's completed the reports and which reports are expired. So you can easily manage the entire process with great transparency directly from your Rentspree dashboard. And even when you share that link out there and you post it, when someone visits that link, it'll automatically add the applicant's email and information right here in your dashboard. And when your property is rented out and no longer available, you can simply deactivate the property, which will prevent future applicants from applying to it. And now we'll just take a really quick look at another account where I have a report so we can take a look at the end product. So here's an account where you see I've sent 1 request and I have 1 completed report back. So if I go ahead and click on this property, what I can see is the applicant's name, the status, credit score, their records, and their monthly income. So I can at a glance see, especially you can imagine if I had multiple applicants, it makes it really easy to look and see all their credit scores at a glance, for example. And so I can click on the applicant here. And what I'm going to see now is the applicant's cover sheet. So this gives high-level information about the applicant, such as their credit information, their trade lines, their income, and their employment. And then if you scroll below, you'll see the rental application is here. And then going further on, I'll see the fully detailed screening reports, such as the credit report, background, and eviction history. Now, one thing, again, that I mentioned is that you can share reports on Rentspree. So let's say you did have a lease listing and you wanted to have the landlord take a look and let you know what they think. Hey, maybe this is a good applicant. You get this applicant and you hit share, which is right here on the top of the reports. And all you do is you enter the email address of the landlord right here and then select what you'd like to share with them. And then the landlord will receive they'll be granted access to view the reports. And so they just go into Rentspree, they log in, and they can securely access the reports directly on Rentspree without you ever having to download the reports, send them through unsecured email or anything like that. So it's automatically handled directly here without you really having to take too many steps. But of course, you could still always print the reports or save them as a PDF if you like to do so. And then let's say the applicants have, you wanted to make a decision, you can click accept deny right here. And then if you hit, let's say we don't really like this, they're not meeting the minimum criteria, we can hit deny and select the reason why. And then you're going to get a sample email that you can review. And if you like it, you can send it off. And now we've just sent that adverse action letter directly to the applicant through Rentspree. So this is really A to Z, everything that Rentspree provides as part of its screening process. And you see that you can easily access Rentspree to sign up, add a property, screen tenants, view reports, share them, and provide decisions to the platform, creating a nice end-to-end solution here for you. So what I'll do is head back here. And so that pretty much covers the main information that I have for the content here today. So I'll now leave it to see if we have any questions that we can address before we wrap up today.
Thank you, Michael. So we have a couple of questions today. First one, in case anyone hasn't seen it yet, is can I use this application for tenants for Arizona rentals or anywhere outside of California?
Yes, so you can use Rentspree for any state. So we're in all 50 states, so you can utilize Rentspree no matter where the tenant's coming from and no matter where the property is. It's really good for that. So you don't have to worry, there's no geographical limitations on that as long as it's within the US.
Excellent. Second question here, is there an option to convert an application to lease?
So currently we don't have the option to convert the application to the lease. So yeah, what you would have to do is do that somewhat manually. However, we're always making improvements, and so we hear your feedback, and that's something that I feel would be very valuable. And so over time, we hope to be able to make some of those improvements to streamline things even further to get right up to the lease as well.
Excellent. One more question here. So is it free to use so long as the background check option is not used?
So the applicant will have to pay a screening fee as long as any of the screening options are selected. So that means that if at minimum a credit report is selected, then the applicant will pay the fee. The only thing that won't cost anything is if you just request a rental application alone from the rental application or from the rental applicant. And you cannot request a background check alone. The background check must come with the credit report, as must the eviction report as well. And I think, yeah, I think that's going to be it for what we have today. Really appreciate everyone's time here on the webinar, and again, encourage you guys to take a look at crmls.rentspree.com, where you can learn more, sign up, contact us, shoot us an email. Love to hear from you. Love to address any additional questions that you have. So thanks very much again, and I'll turn it back over to Sylvia here.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, Stephen, for joining us today. And we will be emailing a recording of the presentation today. So if you missed some parts or would like to review them, that will be available. And if there are any more questions, we're going to go ahead and end the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.